Mount Klyuchevskaya towers over the remote Kamchatka Peninsula. The icy, boundless landscape that surrounds the young volcano has remained unchanged for eons. Enticed by the gentle ridgeline leading towards the sky, climbers attempt to scale its peak.
Второй вариант, он осадный вариант, большие горы все осады делаются, и это практика мировая уже.
A climbing crew heads to the icy, fiery summit of Mount Klyuchevskaya. Welcome to the Great Summits. This episode features the Kamchatka Peninsula in the Russian Far East. Mount Klyuchevskaya is located in the peninsula's northeast. It's the highest active volcano in Eurasia. The volcano has an elevation of between 4,750 and 4,850 meters. Since it erupts almost every year, the altitude of the summit is ever-changing. This footage is of an eruption in 2007. The fiery column of magma blasted up 500 meters high. Clouds of volcanic ash drifted as far as Alaska. In December 2008, it erupted again. A massive lava flow streamed down the northwestern slope. The volcano has now returned to calm, but the lava has left an evident scar on the mountainside. The climbing crew makes its way through a vast snowfield towards Mount Klyuchevskaya. Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky is the central city of Kamchatka. The journey begins here. In summer, northern sea lions migrate here to breed. Once an important military zone, Kamchatka was off limits to foreigners for a long time. It was only after the collapse of the Soviet Union that outsiders were allowed to climb Mount Klyuchevskaya. From Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, the climbing crew will head 600 kilometers north for the town of Klyuchi at the foot of the mountain. They'll then travel 30 kilometers by dog sled across the vast, trackless snowfield. They'll go deep into the northern region via the volcanic monitoring station. It's early April. Upon arriving in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, the crew immediately prepares to climb Mount Klyuchevskaya. Sergei Hubanaya is a volcanologist at the Russian Academy of Sciences. Since little information about the mountain is available, the crew will depend on experts like him. On a four-wheel drive truck, the crew hits the still icy road. There is only one major highway in Kamchatka. The harsh cold here has hindered major developments in the area, for winter temperatures drop to minus 50 degrees Celsius. After 8 hours, the truck comes to a stop. The Kamchatka River is before them. Since thick ice covers the river, it can be crossed over by truck.
危険ではないけども、一応そういう決まりが万が一の時にそのために。
Passengers are asked to walk across the river just in case the ice breaks. Klyuchi, meaning springs in Russian, is the origin of Mount Klyuchevskaya's name. This is the Russian Academy of Sciences Kamchatka Volcanological Station.
Но вот этот центр обработки сейсмической информации Ключевской группы вулканов, северной группы вулканов. Туда отходит вулкан Шевелуч и вся Ключевская группа вулканов.
The volcano constantly alternates between active and dormant periods. Here, researchers study the cycle of the volcano's eruptions.
Вот что мы привыкли циклы какие-то считать, но эти циклы, они не всегда поддаются точному измерению. Поэтому вот если считать с 1945 года по 1994 год, ну это практически там 50 лет. Вот. А значит, следующий, значит, тогда сильный цикл будет тоже лет через 50.
It will take 3 days to get to the foot of Mount Klyuchevskaya. Equipment, tents, and food will be transported by snowmobiles. The crew, meanwhile, will ride on dog sleds headed by Valery. He's an Evan, one of the native ethnic groups in the Russian Far East. The small piece of iron is the brake. Although members of the climbing crew are all seasoned climbers, they are beginners when it comes to riding dog sleds. At 9 a.m., the crew sets out for the Institute of Volcanology and Seismology Monitoring Station at the foot of Mount Klyuchevskaya. To maintain balance on a dog sled, one must skillfully shift his weight. It doesn't take much for a rider to be thrown off a sled. The dogs are frustrated since they have not yet run their hearts out. Half an hour into the ride, the crew emerges on a hill. Their sleds gather speed as the crew members get used to riding them. The dogs maintain a swinging trot. Since the snow is hard, it's easy for them to run. As the crew makes it through the woods, they are greeted with the breathtaking sight of Mount Klyuchevskaya. As the sun rises, so does the temperature. Dogs don't welcome warm air. It wears them out faster. The more the snow thaws, the harder it becomes for the dogs to run. One of the dogs is unable to go any further. The dog has cut his paw on some ice. Valerie covers the dog's foot with a protective booty. Although the booty makes it harder to run, it prevents the cut from getting deeper. After covering nearly 25 kilometers from Klyuchi, the crew calls it a day. Traveling on dog sled proved more tiring than the crew had imagined. A fire is made to prepare some food. For supper, the crew has wild vegetable soup and bread. The dogs get to eat before sunset as well. They are fed once a day with frozen codfish. Near midnight, it begins to snow. On the second day, it's still snowing. Overnight, the area had 20 centimeters of snowfall. Mired in the fresh snowfall, the sleds don't move smoothly. The grueling uphill run continues for 3 hours, exhausting the crew and the dogs alike. They finally reach the Institute at the altitude of 1,250 meters. Yuri Demyanchuk is the head of the Kamchatka Volcanological Station. He's been here researching an eruption that ended 2 months ago. He offers to guide the crew the rest of the way.
Высота почти километр, наверное, собаки притомились.
The crew sets off from here towards the summit of Mount Klyuchevskaya, which now soars right before their sight. The distance to the top is just 10 kilometers. At the altitude of 1,500 meters, the ascent begins. Demyanchuk stops the dog sleds. He says it's too dangerous to continue the ascent since the volcano is becoming active.
Восхождение опасно тем, что днем хорошо пригревает солнце, камни оттаивают и начинают катиться. Это основная опасность здесь, поскольку лавин, снежных лавин здесь не бывает. Вот там самая большая опасность — это камни катящиеся.
Heeding his advice, the crew gives up on going any further. For over 20 years, Demyanchuk has collected data on the mountain's terrain to predict eruptions. He feels that the mountain is a living entity.
Значит, предвестники извержений поступают после того, как начинают увеличиваться длинные линии между определенными точками, высоты начинают расти, то есть давление в очаге возрастает, вулкан как бы начинает разбухать немножко. И в связи с этим появляются эти деформации, которые позволяют давать прогноз. То есть у него своя жизнь, которая очень сильно зависит от лунно-солнечных приливов, от состояния.
Although its volcanic activity had settled down, Mount Klyuchevskaya's surface was still crumbling. Therefore, the crew could not proceed beyond 1,500 meters. Mount Klyuchevskaya, the summit of fire and ice, was still very much active. July. Summer arrives in Kamchatka. At the foot of the mountain spreads a tundra, a land with permafrost soil. During the summer, water from the melted surface frost nurtures plants. Brown bears can be seen at this time of the year as they come to this river to catch salmon. Kamchatka is one of the world's most famous spawning sites for salmon. At the end of July, more than 2 million salmons come up this river. Bears wouldn't dare miss this perfect dining opportunity. Unless the bears load their bodies with enough fat reserves, they can't survive the winter, just around the corner. Salmon are an important source of nutrients for brown bears, whose regular diet consists of nuts. These fish have swum upstream for tens of kilometers from the ocean. After laying their eggs, they quietly die, one after another. Kamchatka River was frozen over in April, but now it's flowing with fresh water. Beyond the river lies a cluster of volcanoes. Mount Klyuchevskaya soars over all others. With its volcanic activities settled for the time being, the climbing crew has another shot to reach its summit. July 25th, the crew prepares for another climb at a gateway to the volcano. Descending from the helicopter are researchers from the Institute of Volcanology and Seismology of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Among them is Sergei Hubanaya, who had joined the crew's previous attempt in April. A researcher uses an infrared camera to check the surface temperatures of the volcano. The lava that poured down the north slope half a year ago had formed an elongated bank. These infrared camera images indicate that the temperatures are nearly 40 degrees Celsius where yellow. Still, the lava retains some heat. On July 28th, the crew begins climbing. As was the case previously, members of the Volcanic Institute come along to assist the crew. Here is the climbing route. From Apafonchich, the crew will first ascend to 2,800 meters. Then, they'll cross a wide slope to reach a base camp between the Klyuchevskaya and Kamin volcanoes. Once there, they will climb to an elevation of 1,600 meters to approach the summit as they avoid ridges prone to rockfall. On day 2, the crew reaches the 2,800 meter point. Now, on to crossing the slope. the crew still has another 10 kilometers to go before they reach the base camp. Having been shaken violently by many eruptions, the soil of the slope is loose and crumbly. What appears to be black dirt is actually volcanic ash. Underneath, all around, is a glacier. They proceed, cutting out each step with an ice axe. A mountain of sharp-edged rock comes into view. It's named Kamin, which means rock in Russian. On the paths between Mount Klyuchevskaya and Kamin is the Volcanic Institute's base camp. "11 hours into the trail, the climbers reach the Schmidt Glacier, which leads to the base camp. There's a crevasse. A peep inside the crevasse reveals that the glacier is made of layers upon layers of ice and volcanic ash. At 9:30 p.m., the crew arrives at the base camp. Kubanaya, who had flown in by helicopter, is there to greet the crew. Here, at 56 degrees north latitude, the sun doesn't set until shortly after 10 p.m. The next morning, a meeting is held to discuss the climbing plan. Alexander Bichenko has climbed Mount Klyuchevskaya over 10 times.
Как мы и собирались, вот надо Александра тут сейчас спрашивать. Но я думаю, что завтра, наверное, будет заброска.
He stresses the importance of not rushing the rest of the climb.
Но второй вариант, у нас осадный вариант, большие горы, все осады делаются, и это практика мировая уже. А так мы сейчас загрузимся, как ишаки, придем, на ночь глядя палатки будем делать. Ну, до туда идти 4 часа. Будем делать палатки, потом ночевать, потом утром. Ну, и так можно, но вот первый раз, я думаю, что тяжелее может быть.
It is decided that they do not hurry. Rather, they'll gradually adjust their bodies to higher altitudes as they go along. Here is Bichenko's route of choice to the summit. After ascending about 500 meters along the ridge at the center, they will cross the slope to the lava ridge. Then, an advance camp will be set at 4,100 meters, from which they'll approach the summit. On day 4, the crew heads out to establish the advance camp. This process should also help the climbers to adjust to the high altitude near the summit. As the temperature rises, the mountain surface loosens and unleashes rockfalls. Shortly before noon, mist begins to rise. It is at a rockfall zone when the crew is blinded by sudden fog. Only their ears can help them evade the deadly hazard. They are now crossing a steam bed, the most dangerous part of the trail. They focus on the surrounding sounds. At 4,100 meters, they reach the site of the advance camp. They look for a place to set up a tent. Just then, although they can hear rocks falling down the slope, they can't tell where. The climbers take shelter behind a boulder. Tumbling rocks can be as big as a grown man. A hit from such a rock would prove fatal. Their guide Bichenko explains that falling rocks always follow fixed paths. They put up a tent behind a boulder, safe from falling rocks. From the advance camp, the fuming summit looks quite close, but the crew still has about 650 meters of vertical drop to cover before getting there. They temporarily retreat to the base camp to rest. From the base camp, the color of the smoke rising from the summit looks thicker than before. It could be an indicator of a looming eruption. However, a member of the Russian Volcanic Research Institute says the conditions are not yet dangerous. Day 5. The climbers ascend to the advance camp again. Not a cloud in the sky. The following day, they will start early towards the summit. The crew wakes up at 2 a.m. and prepares to head out.
Все, идем, да? Все не растягиваться. Аккуратненько. Вперед.
It's 3:10 a.m. The ascent begins. But shortly after they start, an eerie roar fills the air. A glowing red explosion of ash and fire rises from the top of the mountain. That's lava spewing out from the summit. They stop for a while to wait and see what happens. At 5:40 a.m., dawn is breaking. The eruptions seem to have subsided. The crew gets back on the trail. At 4,500 meters, the oxygen level is merely about half of that at sea level. Despite the urge to hurry, they can only afford to move step at a time. With only 100 meters left to climb, the crew hears another round of roars. They take cover behind a rock. After waiting for the rumbling to cease, the crew resumes the ascent. They are now just 80 meters below the summit. Suddenly, volcanic smoke belches out. The crew listens to the sound of fat flakes of ash hitting the ground. The volcano appears to be having small-scale eruptions at regular intervals. For safety, the crew again takes shelter behind a rock. Once the eruption has subsided, they get back on track for the summit. At 11:10, 7 hours after leaving the advance camp, the crew reaches the outer rim of the summit crater. The volcanic vent, about 200 meters ahead, is spewing white gas.
Будем говорить внизу.
It would be too dangerous to go any further. The peak is about 80 meters higher than the crater rim, and it still continues to grow. The sounds of volcanic gas blowouts echo like heartbeats of the mountain.
Как раз вот активизация перед извержением. Вот в такой момент он просыпается. Значит, сейчас вот придем к Деменчуку, расскажем по ситуации, он точно скажет, что должно вот-вот быть извержение. Но я могу сказать, что вы обладаете уникальными съемками. Таких съемок у вулканологов нет. Съемок кратера с 2005 года.
This is the commanding view from near the top of Mount Klyuchevskaya, the highest active volcano in Eurasia.
Спуск опаснее, чем подъем, так что аккуратно. Все поздравления внизу.
As the climbers were about to wrap up the 4-month-long odyssey, a plume of smoke and ash rose once again from the summit. On the Russian peninsula of Kamchatka soars Mount Klyuchevskaya. Here, the vibrant pulse of the earth continues to echo.